Hello, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. Welcome to this Tax UK InFocus webinar support for the June 2025 exams. My name's Isabel and I am an Education Community Manager at ACCA. Our session today, Manage Your Approach, Master Your Exam Strategy, is designed to help you with your upcoming exam preparation. And today, Roger Gitonga has joined us to impart his tax knowledge. Now, during the session, Roger will showcase how to present exam answers effectively for higher marks through some examples. He's also going to share his insights on common student challenges, few important tips, and will be giving answers to questions frequently asked by students. There will also be a live Q&A segment towards the end. Now, as the title of this webinar suggests, this session is an opportunity to learn the exam approach and design your strategy in a way that can help you maximize your preparation for the June exams. Now, before I hand over to Roger, I do have to quickly cover a few housekeeping items and then we'll get stuck in. So at the bottom of your screen, you've got a few buttons that you can use during the session. There is a help icon. You can use that if you're experiencing any technical issues during the session. There's also icons for both the slides and media player, so keep both of those open during the webinar. We've got an attendee chat function where you can talk to fellow attendees. I can see lots of you have already been sharing where you're joining us from today, which is always lovely to see. Be aware that's a public chat, so you should not be sharing personal details there. Do check out the resource list. That's the icon that looks a bit like a file symbol. Click on that and you'll be able to access resources relevant to the webinar today, including the direct links. Do rearrange your screen to suit your preference. If you want to, you can resize the windows. If at any point you can't hear what we're saying or you can't see the slides progressing, try refreshing your browser. That usually helps. Registering for this webinar means that you're going to be sent an email tomorrow with details of how you can listen to it again. So do not worry if you miss something or if you have technical issues at any point, you will be able to watch this again in your own time. I'm going to hand over to Roger in just a second, but I'll be back at the end of the session. If you do want to ask ACCA a question, then please use the Q&A section to put that to the team. We do get a high volume of queries, so we can't guarantee that we'll be able to respond to everyone directly, either Roger discussing them verbally or via web chat. But we're going to try and cover questions that will be helpful to everyone. So that's me done. I'm now going to hand over to Roger. Thanks, Roger, very much, and enjoy the session.
All right. Thank you so much, Isabel. Really enjoyed that. It's such a pleasure to be with each and every one of you. And even before, as I jump into what we're going to be doing today, I'd really love to, probably maybe get a chance to hear or read your expectations, let me say. One of the things that I really enjoy about tax is, well, for me, at least, it makes sense. It makes sense, but I hope it will also make sense for each and every one of us. So probably you could drop in the chat box, what are your expectations, I can see here there's obviously quite a bit of representation across the world, which is such a beautiful sight to see. My name is Roger Gitonga, and I think I'd really love to start off with something that primarily gives us a chance to understand better what we're going to be doing. Now, I can see there's someone expressing their dislike for inheritance tax. My goodness, if inheritance tax was a person, it would quickly run away from this chat box, isn't it? What about the rest of us? What are our expectations, for this particular session? Probably you can just chat me up over there, and I'll try to actually ensure that we address every single one of us, right? Now, I want us to really understand a few things. First and foremost, I'm going to start off with something very dramatic. This is what we're going to be looking at, but we're going to learn how to present our answers effectively, and we're going to do a live demo. And secondly, we're also going to be looking at common student challenges and frequently asked questions. And then we're going to go into the live Q&A, one of my favorite areas, so that I can address your personal concerns and queries. Now, before we start, one of the first things I want us to really adopt is that you are actually going to pass this paper. Now, the reason why I say this is because I've been told before, I mean, I'm an ACCM member, I qualified some years back, and one of the biggest challenges I had to face was fighting my thoughts and then fighting the opinions of others concerning the paper or the qualification. And, you know, it was important for me to say, okay, fine, the guys who are failing, but that's not me. The guys who are not getting it, but that's not me. And let me not lie to you, it wasn't always the case. I'd open, you know, my books and I would read the first introduction in that book, and I'd find tears welling down my eyes in old fashioned, like Denzel Washington. You know, you have that one tear strolling down your cheek. You know, that's exactly what I used to go through. And then I'd have to shake my thoughts again and say, no, I'm going to pass this paper. So what I want us to do in this remaining 2 weeks that you're left with, one of the winning formulas of really passing any paper is your mindset. Before we get to the technicalities, before we get into how to present your answers, before we get into, you know, looking at your distractions, really, it's important for us to appreciate that you can win, you can pass this paper, okay? So let's see. How do we present our exams effectively? So what we're going to do is we're going to run all the way to the CBE practice platform, and I'm going to be touching on a section C question. I'm actually going to do this or show you practically how I'll prepare my answer, and probably you could get a thing or two, you know, on my mindset, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, all right? Let's do this very quickly. It will take some time to load, probably about 5 seconds, and there we go. So I want us to go to section C, because I think that's where I'll come to section A, I'll come to section B, I promise. I'll give you my exam techniques on how I tackle each section. I'll try to also touch on common areas, but let me touch on this particular area. And I'm going to touch on section C, and specifically, I think I'll jump into question 33. This is from the specimen exam. Now, I'm going to start off with what do I normally like to do? And I share this with my students all the time, and I want us to get into my mindset. Probably it will help. The first thing I love to read is the requirement. And I'm told here, calculate Simon's taxable income. Now, I usually say here, the reason why I read the requirement first is, take for instance, as a male figure, here you are and you realize that you're trying to, you know, approach a lady, and you realize that probably her love language is gifts, and you're there spending all your time with her, thinking that your quality time is helping you get some points with her. And all of a sudden, after spending 4 hours of your valuable time, pouring all your energy, your efforts, and, you know, probably your love, quote unquote, you realize this person doesn't like you and walks away completely because their love language was gifts. You came empty-handed, you came with nothing, and you live like a fool. My goodness, you don't want to put yourself in such a position in the exam. So read what is required, what is expected of you. What do I want? So I read this part and I highlight taxable income. Why? You know, one of the things that really eats into our poor performance is time management. And one of the ways that you can actually suffer in time management is because you didn't read the requirement. Allow me to tell you why. You see, there's some students, which we have seen because we mark scripts, you will notice they will jump into this question, and as they're doing it, they start computing the tax liability. But who asked you for it? Who asked you for it? So you start to realize you're basically doing all these shenanigans, you're feeling so excited that you've done so much, and only for you to realize you wasted your time. All you needed was a tax liability. A taxable income. So in my head, the first thing when I read this, I start to internalize, what do I know about how to get a taxable income? Well, taxable income means I need to get my net income because I need to deduct PA or personal allowance from it to get my taxable income. As a result, to get my net income, I do need to get my total income. For me to get my total income, I do need to compute the different types of incomes I have in the question. So I'm basically, processing all this. Then I look at also the number of marks allocated. Why? Every question in any paper in ACCA, from the skills level going up, should take you, 1 mark should take you about 1.8 minutes. True? So if I open my calculator here and I say, okay, 1.8 minutes times 13 marks, I should take about 23 minutes. Now, do we have 23 minutes today? Probably not. So I took the liberty to do it beforehand. Yeah, just a few minutes before we started this session. Now, the next thing, after doing that, the next thing I actually do, and probably I'll just share this with you guys, is I like to format my cells. Now, why I do this is I will literally highlight some of these cells. I'll click on the shift button and I'll play around with the directional keys on my keyboard. And the reason why I do this is because I want to format my cells. I'll click on this money icon and I'll click on the custom and I'll click on number and I'll click on probably, this red in brackets, which means whenever I get a chance to deduct any amount, it's put in red and in brackets. Now, this really helps the marker to follow through with what you have been doing. Remember, the markers of Section C are as human as you. So you want to make it as easy as possible for them to spot what you're doing, okay? And therefore, once I do that and I highlight, I'll come back to my sheet. Then once I've done that, I read the question. The scenario relates to 2 requirements, good for you. Then you're told here on 6th of April, 2024, Simon commenced employment with ACO Limited. I wonder where we get these names from. On 1st of December, 2024, he commenced in partnership with ART, preparing accounts to 31st of March. Wow. So this gentleman is earning money from both ends. And I really love to interact with the question. I try to visualize this man called Simon. He's really just trying to hustle. He's been working. Now he's joined into partnership with some guy called Art, and they use their accruals basis. Good for them. And I look through very quickly through the question. I see what I have. I see I have employment, I have partnership, I have property income. And immediately my mind is jogging on what I know about these areas, what I need to be careful of around these areas. And as I look at this, I'm told during the tax year, Simon was paid a gross annual salary of 24,250. Now, I find this to be very easy to capture effectively, and I'm just going to be showing you my working on my right-hand side, on your left. Okay, I'm guessing it's your left. I know some of us, we still struggle with our left and right, isn't it? Now, you find here your salary, 24,250. That's your gross annual salary. And then you're told here throughout the tax year. Now, the reason why I'm highlighting this is because one of the tricks we like to use is to primarily ensure that you are able to prorate if the pro rata basis applies. So if, let's say, a benefit has only been provided for 4 months, then I'll only consider 4 months. If it's been provided for 6 months, I'll only consider 6/12. So when I am told here it's throughout the year, I know I do not have to prorate. Now, as I read through it, I'm told here ACO Limited provided Simon with living accommodation. So his employer has given him some place to stay in. Lucky guy. And you now realize, in my mind, I'm already asking myself, what do I know about accommodation? I know that there's usually an original benefit, especially because it's been provided by the employer. Probably the employer owns the property. So there's a high chance that, because we're told here they purchased the property. So we know that there's an original benefit defined by the annual value. And there's an additional benefit if that house was purchased for more than £75,000. So we're told here the company had purchased the property, but this is all the way back in 2012 for $89,000. Man, so this means Simon is living in a good house. So we probably would want to tax him on that. He's living in a very good home. So he's not just getting accommodation, he's getting good accommodation. Now, I want us to see this. You're told it was valued at 143,000 on the 6th of April 2024. Now, you should already ask yourself, why are they giving you the market value and why are they giving you the purchase cost? And you do realize, for those who have been reading, you appreciate that if the house was purchased for more than £75,000, we do have an additional benefit. And if we do have an additional benefit, and that basically means that we might want to appreciate that, there's a computation to get that additional benefit. And to get that computation, we normally we normally ask ourselves first, or rather we have to get the cost of providing living accommodation. For us to get the cost of providing living accommodation minus 75,000, we realize we have to ask ourselves whether that property was bought more than 6 years ago from the date it was provided to him. So since it was provided to him in the year 2024, the 6th of April 2024, and the property was bought more than 12 years ago, we realize that this is more than 6 years. So for us to get the cost of providing living accommodation, we will take the market value, something that is current, okay, and not the purchase cost. Now, HMRC is quite sneaky here because you realize that on one end, if what you take the purchase cost, the benefit would also be lower. So they prefer you taking the market value if you've exceeded a 6-year limit because, one, of course, the house has appreciated, which means higher benefit. But secondly, therefore, higher tax that will be paid or remitted. But secondly, you also realize it makes more sense to consider the market value because we're now trying to compute the tax today. Now, I look at this and I realize the market value is 143,000. And I'm also told here there's an annual value of 4,600. And I'm also told that the property was furnished during March 2024 at a cost of 9,400. And this accommodation or this living accommodation is not job related. So what do I notice here? First and foremost, there's too many workings. I have to get there. Original benefit, I have to get the additional benefit, I need to get the the furniture, I need to get the benefit of living in a furnished home, which means he doesn't have to bring things. And as a result, it basically means I do need to show a separate working. So you will see here, I'll put working one. And for the marker, it's very easy for them to follow. Where is working one? So I present it below because it's easier from a marker's perspective to scroll downwards than it is to scroll sideways. Either way, any of them would work, but I'm just saying it would be easier for a marker to scroll downwards than to scroll sideways. So we come here and we find the original benefit, 4,600 according to the annual value. We have the additional benefit and we take their 143,000 minus 75,000 times the official rate of interest of 2.25%. Since it's a full year, we don't have to prorate anything. And we get the furniture cost as well. And for furniture, we normally take 20%. 9,400 times 20%, okay? Times 20%. So we take that, we add all of them. We have their 8,010, and I put it in its rightful position. Now, as I was going through the FAQs, one of the questions that actually did come up was on loan benefits. And I want us to tackle this. You're told here on 1st of December 2024, I highlight this because I realize, my goodness, this is not a full year because our tax year ends on 5th of April 2025. So I'm looking at around 4 months, December, January, February, March. We don't count April. Now, don't be ashamed to eat your fingers during the exam because you're trying to count months, okay? No one, I mean, you're passing or failing alone, you understand? So you don't be ashamed of eating your fingers. You're like, okay, 1, 2, 3, some of us were taught how to count using our fingers or counting our fingers, almost biting them, my goodness. So I want you guys to realize you have 1st of December 2024. And then you're told here it was an interest-free loan. Good for him. Didn't pay any interest. And it was of 84,000. So one of the questions that came in that I was seeing previously was in a loan benefit question, which one do we use? Do we use the average method or do we use the strict method? Now, in a question like this, let me give you a few tips. One, if they don't state the type of method you're going to use, you will do both methods and then choose the low amount. But secondly, another tip that you can take into consideration is because there was no loan payment done. You see, this person someone took 84,000, but he's not cleared anything. He's not paid anything towards this loan. He's not cleared the balance. He's not reduced the loan principal. So if the loan amount is 84,000, if it remains the same across the year, what normally happens is that both methods, whether you use the average method or the strict method, you will get the same answer. So rather than wasting your time trying to show both the average and the strict method, if you find that the amount outstanding remains the same throughout the year, okay, then instead of trying to do both methods and then taking the lower amount, you don't have to do that. Rather, just take the amount, 84,000, as we have there, multiply it by 2.25% because that's the official rate. Considering that this is an interest-free loan, it basically means that, hey, listen, you should have taken the loan at 2.25%, the official rate, but instead you've been given that loan interest-free. So the benefit is that excess, the difference between what you should have paid at, which is the official rate, minus what you actually paid. And in this case, you paid no interest. So the difference will be at 2.25%. So if we take here 84,000 times 2.25%, and we multiply it by 4/12. Okay, because you're prorating, and you get your answer there, you get your total employment income. And then we come into partnerships. And what do you notice into partnerships? We told you the partnerships tax adjusted trading profit for the 4-month period ended 31st of March 2025 is 29,700. They do tell you this is before taking account of capital allowances. So I do need to consider the capital allowances. I'm also told the only item of plant and machinery owned by the partnership is a car. Now, cars do not claim AIA, so we won't think of AIA. We're given the cost, which is fantastic. We're told when it was purchased, but remember, with capital allowances, we prorate based on the period. In our case, our period is 4 months, okay? And not necessarily based on when you purchase the asset. And you have to be extremely careful, okay? You need to be extremely careful, okay? So as we get through this, the next thing that you see here, now you find, wow, we have here 25,000, and the car has a CO2 emission of 125 grams per kilometer. Now, what should that tell you? This is a special rate pool car. Now, if you suffered selective amnesia, for whatever reason, or you forgot, let me be polite, or you forgot, you can actually use the tax tables, open them, use them, don't be arrogant. If you don't know, you don't know, okay? And I would advise before the exam, just familiarize yourself with what's in the tax tables, because it really helps you to be able to say, we've been given this. Oh my goodness, we've not been given this. So you don't want to fill your mind with things you'll already be given. All you just need to know is how to use them. So I know here CO2 emissions over 50 grams, 6% is the WDA. But then I'm also given a twist. 40% is for private journeys. Now, I do need to remember capital allowances is capital expenditure claimed on plant and machinery that is used in the trade, in the business. So I will only consider the business proportion, which is 60%. So if you look at my work in here, and you can see it's beautifully colored, it makes it very easy for the marker to see what we're deducting. I will take here 25,000 times 6% times 60%, because we are looking at the business proportion, and then times 4/12. Now, I don't know if you noticed, I didn't give a separate working because all this could fit in the cell. It's not too bulky, and therefore the examiner would like that, okay? Okay, the examiner would like that. And therefore you'll appreciate, in this case, it gives you a chance to be able to, if you can fit a working in a cell and it's not too bulky, fit it. Now, it moves on and you're told here, profits are shared 40% to Simon. Simon is interesting. He just joined the partnership and he already has 40%. What a negotiator. And this is after paying an annual salary of 6,000. But remember, when did Simon join this partnership? We're told he joined the partnership on 1st of December. So he's only been there for 4 months. So that means the salary will only deduct a 4-month salary. So we take here 6,000 times 4 over 12, and I get 2,000. So the profits that will be shared 40% to Simon is after the salary is deducted. So I deduct the salary, I get the difference, I get 27,400, and Simon, it's a very good 40% of that. Good for him. So we get that 10,960. Then we come to the last one, property income. Now, Simon owns a freehold house, which is let out furnished. The property was let throughout the year. Oh, wow, throughout again. So I pick that up. It's a monthly rent of 660, so I don't have to do much. I'll just take here 660 times 12, because there are 12 months in a year, isn't it? And then we're told here he paid council tax of 1320. Fantastic. So we less that. And we're told here, very interesting concept being tested. We're told here that he also replaced the property washing machine during March 2025. Now, this is under property income, and it's known as the replacement of domestic items relief. So I can call that the replacement relief. I don't have to write that whole name. And you get to this point and you find out he replaced the property's washing machine, and the old washing machine was sold for 70 pounds, which is fantastic. But this is being replaced by a washer dryer. Now, what do you notice here? The old asset was a washing machine. The new asset is a washer dryer. They are not the same. One is just an old washing machine. The other one has a dryer to it. So they're not the same. So what we normally do is we ignore this. This is a distraction. I see you, examine. I see you. So I strike this out, and then I come to the cost. And I say here, the cost of a similar washing machine would have been 730. And that's what we're going to take. We're going to take the cost of a similar washing machine minus the sale proceeds of the old asset. So that's 730 minus 70. So we put that in the cell, we get 660, and we deduct that. We get our answer there as 5940. Then I present my answer as well. I have my employment income. Notice when I click here, it shows B5 because I have linked my data. So the marker can see where I borrowed it from, okay, where I've copied it from. So I get my employment income, my trade income, my property income. And then from there, I come here, get my net income. My total and net income are the same, so I don't have to write total income. I can just jump into the net income. I less my PA, personal allowance, and I get my answer there, taxable income. This is your taxable income. As we have said, this is what we needed to get, our taxable income, okay? Now, allow me to come back to our presentation. I was just showing you guys how we present our works, how you can get easy marks. See how I've used highlight, I've used the strike through function. I don't have to use the calculator because, everything, I can use formulas on the cell. I don't have to use the symbol as well. We know we're doing the UK tax, so we don't have to put it in pounds. It's obviously in pounds. And primarily, I don't have to use the scratch pad. This is like my rough paper, and we don't need that really in this kind of question. So I'm done. Now, I would want to come and show you guys how we deal with the other sections, section A and section B, and we'll give you a chance to be able to look at that. Now, I can see a few questions coming in. Why did time apportion for over 12 years? The car was purchased in February. Remember, with capital allowances, we prorate based on the period and not when you purchase the car. Okay, when you're computing capital allowances, you prorate based on the period and not when you're not when you purchase the car. Okay, it's a trick area. A lot of students fail it, by the way, and I'm really glad that you've been able to ask that. And I see questions coming in, so that means let me quickly go through the common student challenges. I'll come back to section A and B just to give you a few of my tips, and then we can pick it up from there. So the first one, common student challenges: stress, anxiety, and fear. Allow me to mention why this is a problem. Actually, I was watching something today, imagine, and this gentleman was saying, brilliant fellow, he was saying that unfortunately, most of us today spend about more than 3 hours on our phone per day or on social media. And what that tends to happen is that for someone who reduces their usage of social media or their screen time, as compared to the one who doesn't, your stress or anxiety levels actually double. Now, this worried me because this affects my students. My students spend a lot of screen time or a lot of time on their phones, which means that even their coping mechanisms start to weaken when it comes to the exam. And it's a common student challenge. How do you overcome this? Now, we've dealt with this before. I would normally start off with reduce your screen time. Okay, reduce your screen time. Secondly, get a chance to be able to get into a space where you're able to consistently give yourself study breaks. So as you're studying, give yourself 5 to 10 minutes just to reflect on what you've done, to audit your thoughts, to calm down, okay? And say, no, you know what, I can do this. Speak positivity to yourself. Speak life, as I like to say it, to yourself. Secondly, a lack of preparation. Now, I subdivide this into knowledge and application. If you notice, whenever you get your exam, my exam performance report, it actually speaks about these two areas. So there are people who are informed. Now, what do I mean by this? They have information, but they're not knowledgeable. What's the difference? This is where you find yourself in a situation where you're in the same class with someone or in the same room, same session, but there's one person who understands better than the other. Why is that the case? For some of you, you're receiving information. For another, you're receiving knowledge. And then when we get into the component of knowledge, one of you has better understanding. So you realize for you to increase your dominance around the knowledge sector, what will increase that dominance is your understanding. Now, with understanding, how do you increase it? You increase your understanding by taking time to process what you're reading, one. Two, being able to do it as your nerves are calm. Three, avoid distraction, which is my point 3, by the way. And four, probably even meditate. This can increase understanding. So if I sit down and I say, by the way, why do they reduce personal allowance once my adjusted net income is above 100,000? You could sit down and say, I remember tax works under 3 things: social factors, economic factors, environmental factors. I do presume if my adjusted net income is above 100,000, I could actually be considered to be fairly well up. I'm not doing too badly. So it means that we're trying to create an economic balance or a social balance where we tax the rich a bit richer, a bit more, and then we reduce the tax burden on those who are usually at the lower brackets. This is why, for one of my friends who say they hate inheritance tax, he must be a rich man. That man who is saying he hates inheritance tax, he must be a rich man. Because the thing is that, or a rich person, because you realize inheritance tax is actually almost a tax for the rich. If you think about it, yeah? I mean, you realize a huge amount of your inheritance, about 325,000, can be covered at zero. So if you're receiving inheritance of about 325,000, man, you're doing well. That's a very good, you should just go and, wish your mother happy Mother's Day twice, because go greet your father, buy him lunch. You realize it's a very good place to be in. But also at the same time, if you look at the Forbes list, you realize that the richest people in the world, many of them, not a huge number, but a good number of them, actually got their money from inheritance. So they're basically living through generational wealth. And then there's you, who is here trying to listen to me for 1 hour. My goodness. Then the third one is application. And application comes from practice. Okay? Constant practice really helps you. really, really helps you. And I say here with application, I look at two things: quantity in terms of the number of questions you do, and quality in terms of how well you do them. And that means that if I give you the question you've just done right now, can you score the whole 13 marks? If you can, your quality is good. Well done. Then we have multiple distractions. This could be your phone. This could be your family. This could be yourself. This could be your relationship. Some of you need to break up with someone. I'm not encouraging anything. But basically, keep in mind anything that is preventing any particular growth in your life can also affect your growth in, or unfortunately, your exam performance. Okay, procrastination, and I'm sure we all understand this, the stealer of time. Just think of it this way: every single time you're allowing anything to steal your time, it's also stealing your destiny. And then lack of sufficient rest and sleep. In this very crazy buzzing world, unfortunately, we do struggle. Oh my goodness, we do struggle with, if you're not talking to people, if you're not working, if you're not trying to consume information, if you're not catching up on that series, if you're not, you're just consistently doing things that are occupying you, and you don't get a chance to rest. And that really affects your performance as well. Okay. Now, frequently asked questions. Why don't we start here? So someone asked me, when doing computations, can we do workings in a separate section of the Excel spreadsheet and write working one? I think I've showed you guys how to do that. So that question is answered. Secondly, in section A, where we have to feed an answer on a box and there are some zeros outside the box, and let's say the answer is 23,000, are we supposed to write 23 or key the whole 23,000? So if you realize that the zeros are 3 outside the box, then you would put 23 in the box. So that it's 23 and the zeros have already been added for you. But many times the kind of questions we're given is, I can show an example here in section A, where you realize you don't necessarily, you feed in actually everything. So if we come to sharing my screen again, I'll just pick up one. Okay. If you find here, what amount of personal allowance, when you find this kind of questions, not your favorite, I'm sure. Some of you like playing the picky ponky kind of game, but here, man, we caught you. Yeah, we caught you. Yeah, you don't know. And you realize in such a question, if you come here and you say the answer is 8,270, for instance, you can easily fill in your answer there effectively so. Now, how this normally works in a section A question, by the way, one of the things I like about section A is you can easily cruise through it. Now, allow me to show you. You look at a question like this and you're being told, what class 4 NICs do you have? This is me touching on your section A now, okay? What class 4 NICs do you have? And you sit down and you think, what are class 4 NICs? So you open the tax tables and you realize, as I scroll down here, let's come to the tax tables. NICs are always normally at the very bottom. You find here class 4, you have some rates given to you. So I have some very interesting rates here. I don't know, £1, 12,570, etc, etc, etc. So this is, you told you William is self-employed. His tax-adjusted trading profit was 84,050. William contributed 5,400. This is just a distraction. I don't think I really need that. I come here to the profit. And when I open this, one of the things that I see, okay, that really helps, as I open the tax tables, I'm able to see here a few things. One, I need to follow these rates effectively so. So I'm told here from £1 to 12,570 is nil, from 12,570 to 5270 is 6%. And then we have something there. So what I can do here is probably just open my calculator and I'll say here, okay, fine. I have 5270 minus 12,570 is equals to 6%. And I get there my answer. And then I say here, probably if I had 84,050 minus 5270 times 2%, and I slot that answer there. And then I say, maybe I can add this 2262, and I get there 2938. Oh, and I chose the answer. And I get my answer very quickly. It's a 2-mark question, so it will take you about 3.6 minutes. There are some questions that are even easier, where you just select from a theory. You're told here from an ethical viewpoint, which two of the following actions would be or could be expected of your firm. And you come here and you're told reporting under money laundering. You could pick up some very interesting things, reporting and advising. And this is based on what you know. This is based on what you know. So if you know, you know. If you don't know, you don't know. Okay. Then the next thing that we have here is, allow me to stop sharing. Let me come back to my screen here. Let's try and see. The next question I got was, how can I score more marks in section A? I would say here, take some time to always read the requirement, highlight what's important, and then do the question, especially if it's a multiple choice question. Don't be too quick to look at the options given to you, okay? Don't be too quick to look at the options given to you. Rather, focus first on doing the question. If you noticed, for me, I did the question first, then I looked at the options, unless it's a theory question where you can actually immediately eliminate, okay? There are also some secrets. Let me give you an example. Let's say, for instance, you've been given a question on inheritance tax. Let me touch on this inheritance tax. One of the most common mistakes by students is deducting in inheritance tax the annual exemption. And you realize you have an annual exemption of 3,000 in the current year, and you can also carry an annual exemption forward for up to 1 year, isn't it? And you realize that someone has forgotten to deduct the annual exemption. So if I look at my choices, sometimes I'll find that there's one option that has the answer without deduction of annual exemption, both of the current year and the prior year, and there's another one that considers it. So let's say I have an answer of 40,000 and I have another option of 34,000, where the annual exemption of both the current year and the prior year were deducted. I'll notice, without even doing the question, I'll basically think, I'll know my answer is 34,000 because I'll know someone forgot to deduct the annual exemption, and that could also help in basically getting more marks sometimes, in case you don't know. It's also good never to leave any question unanswered, okay? Never to leave any question unanswered. Always ensure you answer all questions. Then we come to section B. Which topic should we expect in section B? Let me be honest with you. 3, inheritance tax, VAT, capital gains tax. So my friend who doesn't like inheritance tax, my friend, work on it. You can do this, okay? So rather than me discouraging you, I can tell you, you can actually do this, okay? You can actually pass it. Maybe just to do a very quick summary of inheritance tax, we look at 2 aspects. One, we look at lifetime transfers and transfers that as a result of death. So when we're looking at lifetime transfers, and I think with inheritance tax, there's also a need for therapy because there's too much death, too much death, my goodness. But you realize with lifetime transfers, you have potentially exempt transfers, which is an individual to individual. And we have chargeable lifetime transfers, which is individual to, trustees. And of course, there are topic explainer videos on YouTube that can help you with that. So those are the 3 areas that you can find in section B. My tips for section B, probably, that I think are very critical and might actually help you maybe get a few more marks, is if I come to section B, section B, by this, for me, is my favorite, and this is just a biased opinion, but it's my favorite because I find it to be the easiest, and I'll tell you why. I find it to be the easiest because I know if I failed in this question 16, question 17 will not be dependent on question 16. They are interdependent. And I like the fact that there are times, like, for instance, if I'm told here to focus what is Grant CGT in respect of the disposal of shares in DAB Limited, I will only look for the fact that Grant sold 25,000 shares in DAB Limited for 240,000. They're telling me to get the CGT liability. So I'll sit down and I'll think, you know what? In such a question, one of the things that can really benefit me is I don't have to read everything. I'll only have to capture this part. And I know the rest might not necessarily be that important. Okay, unless now if I continue reading, I'll read everything, but most times I'll realize not everything will be tested. You see here, there's Marlon and Alvita. It's not needed because our focus is on Grant, and Grant is only this first part. So I don't have to read everything, and I can easily tackle questions very easily. Also, the beauty with section B, some questions are theoretical questions, so there's a high chance for you to actually score more if your knowledge is strong, okay? If your knowledge is strong. Then another thing that I want us to maybe look at the last question as I come to probably my live Q&A, because I wanted to also give people a chance to ask any questions. I find it beneficial loans a little confusing. Which method? I think I answered this when I was doing question 33, and you can read my answer there. And then you told you help me in business asset disposal relief. I would suggest the examiner's tool. The examiner proposes a certain tool that helps people remember, known as for the tax win, or FTTW, where you realize here that you get a chance to look at if you have to be either a shareholder, it has to be for business purposes, the ownership has to be for at least 2 years, and you need to either have worked there or you might be a shareholder as well. So there are a few conditions to consider, but for me, the three that I look at is it's either disposal of business or business assets. You should have owned the business for 2 years, not the asset. This is where people fail. They look at the ownership of the asset, but rather you should be looking at the ownership of the business for at least 2 years. And it should either be a disposal by the owner, which basically means they have more than 5%. That's what F stands for, more than 5%. Or you are an officer. Basically, you work for the company, either a director, company secretary, an employee, in simple terms. You work for the company. Okay. And then let's come to the live Q&A. So I'll just pick up a few questions that I've seen being sent my way. It is difficult for me to remember all the rules and formats, even after practice. Any tips? I like that, Umais. For me, what affected my, what affected me in terms of my memory? A few things. One, my health, the health of my brain. Let me just say it that way. The health of my brain. There are times when there are muscle memory, exercises that one can do that really helps. Repetition can also help. You've said here, even after practice, I think for me, the beauty about practice is that sometimes you may not necessarily get into cramming, but something could be familiar to you. So when you're doing a question, you realize, oh yeah, I remember this happened to me. Oh yeah, I remember that happened to me. So I normally find that many times some people who might be struggling with memory is because you're starting to practice now, and that gives you a bit of pressure, and you're trying to get all this information in check. So it becomes a bit of a problem. Also, I would say every second that you have, use it, because every second that you have gives you an opportunity to become better. So it's not all hope lost. You do realize you still have time to capture a few of these things. You have 2 weeks, which is, if you constantly do that practice, trust me, the things that were difficult before, you'll be good. I remember I would go to the exam room on the day of the exam. My mind would be blank. My goodness, I'd be panicking because I'd think, would I ever get this? And eventually things did make sense. I'd sit in the exam room, I'll take a deep breath, and then afterwards, I'll not look around, because there's sometimes, I used to do paper-based exams. There were no computer-based exams then. And you'd find, there are guys, they are scribbling, almost asking for another booklet. And then there's you who has not even, you've not even written your details down. So you take a deep breath, and then from there, just let it flow. Take every step. You don't know nothing. You know something. And probably what you know is enough to pass. Whether to show the working notes on the right-hand side or the down-hand side is my question. Any of them can work, but if you're doing the right-hand side, don't put it too far. I'll say skip one column and then do it on the next column, okay? But don't, I don't know, there's some students who you'll find their actual format is, let's say, in the A column, and then they put, I don't know, their workings in the G column. And you're just wondering, how can I scroll all that? So don't put it too far. Okay, but any of them can work. But of course, I'd always prefer the down, what I showed during my presentation. You have a question. Does a student is passed only by practice other than the reading? And please give me your recommendation current amount. Okay. So someone is asking me in simple terms, can someone just pass through practice of questions? So I would subdivide, as I told you, my focus is on knowledge and application. You can't apply, even though you're practicing questions because you're enhancing application. And the thing is that if you're applying, you're building application because you have knowledge. You apply what you know. Knowledge is powerful. I tell people, I want you to imagine this. Some of you in your own homes, let's say, for instance, in the night, you're pressed. Okay, I mean, you're really pressed. But for whatever reason, your eyes could be closed and you could literally walk to the washroom with your eyes closed, relieve yourself, go back. You've not switched on the light. You've not done anything. You've literally gone to the washroom. You knew where the washroom was and you are asleep. How was that possible? You have knowledge. So knowledge is light, because it basically means that even when you're asleep, you can still see because you know where it is. So knowledge is powerful, my friend. Don't ignore knowledge, but practice is also equally important. Do you take the market value if it is after 6 years since the purchase? The answer is yes. For the expensive accommodation charge, do you only use the market value if it was purchased over 6 years? Now, there's some questions that could give you additional costs. So for instance, you find renovation costs were done, and we normally state here that when we take the market value, we would take also any current costs that have been incurred in that year. And if you're taking the purchase cost, we'll take any subsequent expenditure. So if, let's say, we took the purchase cost of 2012, would also, if there was any expenditure that had been incurred between 2012 and 2024, for instance, as an example, you'd end up taking the subsequent expenditure plus the purchase cost. So any cost expenditure you might have incurred on that accommodation in 2013, 2014, 2015, all the way to 2024 would be considered. But please note, because you're determining the cost of providing living accommodation, we normally ask ourselves, is the accommodation, was it provided more than 6 years, was it bought more than 6 years ago before it was provided, or less than 6 years? If it was less than, we'll take the purchase cost plus any subsequent expenditure. If it was more than 6 years ago, then we'll take the market value plus any current expenditure incurred. At the time of cessation, do we have to apportion the trading profit over 4 months account for calculation of income tax? All right. Now, when it comes to cessation, you have to be very careful with what we're looking at in cessation. Many times we find it could either be a loss you're looking at, where we'll normally determine terminal loss relief, or if I get your question correctly, because if it is, let's say, capital allowances, we do realize we are going to apportion based on the period, the tax years. So we'll look at the period that falls maybe in the tax year 2024 to 2025, and maybe 2025 to 2026, if it stretches between those two tax years. So we're going to look at the months that fall within that period and the ones that fall within the following period. And you realize at that point in time, we will have to apportion based on the tax years. If it's capital allowances, you're computing based on cessation. Remember, there's no WDA, there's no AIA, there's no FYA, when you're ceasing. Okay, you might get a balancing charge or a balancing allowance on your main pool and your special rate pool. Will you be awarded for the process followed in section C? Always show you're working. Always show you're working. I met a student who, the answers were right, but they didn't show their workings. So you see the question we've done? They could have scored the full 13 marks, but instead of showing the workings, they just slotted the answers. They did it on their calculator, and then they put the answers there. My friend, they didn't score more than 10. And you have to realize showing your workings is very important. And that's why I took you guys through that, to show you that for us, we want to know how you got it and not necessarily your final answer. Your final answer is important, but it's even more important for you to know how you get it. Because when you're going to practice, it's not just the final answer that's important, it's how you get it that's more important. So that in case there's any particular change, even in tax rates, at least your application skills have not struggled. So the only thing you're updating is your knowledge on the new tax rates. Because you can imagine, for us tax lecturers, we're always learning. We're always learning. So last time I failed due to lack of knowledge, and I'm really sorry to hear that. Can you please specifically guide me how to prepare section 1 or section A? Now, let me state this. And this is just my biased opinion, okay? Income tax and corporation tax are largely one of the highest taxed. I mean, tested areas because they take up to 50 to 55% of your paper, which means the two combined are literally your pass rate. Now, you'll notice, and don't do this, don't just read for the two and don't do that, okay? Don't do that, I'm just guiding you. So you'll realize CGT, or capital gains tax, and VAT and inheritance are each 12 to 14%, per or each. And then self-assessment is about 6 to 10%, okay? So you will realize in section A, every area is tested. And probably there's a high chance if you fail in section A in terms of knowledge, you're struggling largely with income tax, because income tax can give you up to 4 questions there, which is about 8 marks. And you maybe were struggling also with self-assessment, which could have been tested about 3 to 4 questions. And that's about 7 questions already in section A, from those 2 areas. So it basically means those are areas you might want to work on as well. It would have been really good for me to have seen also the specific areas that you particularly did not perform well in, so that it also helps us to know which areas you specifically lacked knowledge in, okay? I failed at 42%. I'm really sorry to hear that. My weak areas are inheritance, tax, and CGT. Been reading the chapters and practicing, but it seems it is not enough. What do you suggest to do? All right. I personally, when it comes to this, first and foremost, whenever you failed, the first thing you need to deal with is how you feel about it, okay? People don't know how important this is, but there's sometimes you could actually find yourself in a situation where you're wrestling a lot with your thoughts and you think you're going to fail again. And my friend, it doesn't have to happen again. So you have to, first of all, shape your perception. Actually, I tell people there are 3 things you want to be careful with in the last month. 1, you want to be careful with your mindset. I've already shared that with you. 2, you want to be careful with your distractions, okay? There's some distractions that are good, okay? And what I mean by that is, let's say, for instance, there's some things that are not going well in your life, externally, beyond the CCA. There's some distractions that can actually be helpful, in terms of maybe soft music, things like that. But there are some distractions that are very dangerous because they stray you away from your paper or your preparation for your paper. And then 3, be careful also with the people that surround me because they can speak life or death into your preparation. So be very careful when you're preparing again because you can hear all these negative comments. Also be kind to yourself. Then from there, when you now comes to the technical parts, with the technicalities, I would focus primarily on trying to, when I practice a question, take some time to see why you failed. There's sometimes we do so many questions, but we don't take the time to understand, why did I even pass that question? Why did I even fail that question? What did they do? What was different? So be very careful with those differences so that you don't find yourself in a situation where you're always doing questions, but you're not really taking the time to understand why, okay? So I think that's very important. And then we also have here, if my calculations in workings are correct, but my mistake, I input wrong final answer, then the examiner will deduct my marks, okay? If your workings are correct, but you input the wrong answer, I don't know, somehow. Let me first of all say this, to avoid that, just link your answers. So if you've already done the workings well, just go to the cell that you wanted to put it in, put the equal sign and link it to the cell that you put your answer. Okay, so to avoid that. But again, we'll give you full marks for the, of course, the workings. Sometimes we have this rule known as the own figure rule, where you find if that answer was required in another particular section of the question, we will use your figure, your wrong figure, and see whether you've done the right computation using that figure, and we'll still give you the full marks. Okay. Any tips on section C questions where questions are split into smaller marks? It seems harder to get marks where there are multiple requirements, okay? All right, I don't think it is the case. Maybe sometimes you might feel like there are too many questions tied to them, and there are times when you might feel overwhelmed. You might feel you have, I don't know, a theory. I would say when you're practicing, try to practice every bit of your area so that you don't feel overwhelmed. Because the thing is that as much as they're broken down into different parts, they're still equivalent to 15 marks. So the only thing you're actually wrestling with probably might not be the knowledge, but the fatigue of trying to see many questions in one area, which means you need to build resilience and tenacity, which can only be built through previous practice, okay, before you get into. So try and also, when you encounter such questions in your own practice, handle those ones now, so that if you do get them in the final exam, you're not struggling with it. You've already built a very strong resilience to such kind of questions, okay? I find I get mixed up on the rules between the treatment for an individual versus a company. Those are very many rules. I think you're talking about self-assessment. There's a topic explainer video I've done on the ACCA Student Resources YouTube channel. Please check it out. I take some time to just show the breakdown between the two. Okay. I think, unfortunately, I might not be able to. I wish I could touch on every single thing, but my last advice to you guys is practice, calm, remain calm. I think I've spoken about some of the challenges and the things that you can do. Give yourself breaks. So if you're studying for, let's say, 2 hours, take some time to, do some exercise probably in between your breaks. Okay, but allow me to stop there. It was such a pleasure. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Allow me to pass it back to Isobel.
Thank you so much, Roger. That was such a good session. I'm really sorry to interrupt to wrap up, but we are out of time. Before we go, everyone, just a very quick poll. It's a very easy question, so don't panic. Ooh, how can I move the slides along? We do have a quick poll. If you could just take part, we want to know if you know when the mock and debriefs are both available. So I'll give you just a quick 30 seconds to submit and let us know when the mocks and the debriefs are available. I can see in the meantime lots of thumbs ups and hearts. Roger, thank you so much for your guidance today. I think it's been much appreciated. Just give everyone another 10 seconds or so to submit your answer to the poll. Okay, let's have a look at the answer. Okay, a little bit of a mix. Some of you have been honest and just said no idea, which is fair enough. But the correct answers are the 9th and the 9th and the 16th of May. So the mock exams are available now. And the debrief videos will be available this Friday via the YouTube channel. So do make sure to check that out. With this, I need to bring things to a close, but like I said, I hope you found today's live session very useful. I can see in the comments that people have been really enjoying your session, Roger. Just a quick reminder that you can access the important resources that we've mentioned in the resource section. Don't forget to refer to these during your exam preparation. And everyone who's registered for this webinar will be getting an email with details of how they can watch it again. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Roger, again for extending your support. And thank you to the team in the back end who were answering questions and helping to deliver this session successfully. Wishing you all the very best for your exams. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. All the best.